listing agreement. Now, when you log into the MLS, you're going to see everything pulled up on your dashboard. We're going to start by clicking on the Authorization Instanet section, and it's going to pull us to where you're going to see your dashboard with all your contracts. Over here on the left, we're going to click on Forms. Under Forms, it's going to show commercial, buyer, seller, all that information here. We'll click on Commercial, and then at the top, we see Commercial Exclusive Right to Sell Listing Agreement Seller's Agency. This is what we're going to go through. Below that is a very similar one, but it says or lease. Now that includes information on if you're going to take a listing to lease a commercial property, such as, hey, Johnny, I got to list your 1,500 square feet at $10 a square foot. Here's our agreement. It also has some information there for if you're going to sell the property, but if we're just going to list the commercial property and purely do a listing agreement for it, we want to use this top one. So clicking on that, I've already got it opened up on a big screen so we can see it all. Here it is. Looking at the top, it's very simple. This first page has a lot of good information on here for us. Has the seller's name. Now for a commercial, you want to make sure you ask, is the property held in your name or an entity name? Oftentimes it'll be in an LLC or some kind of company, and you need to make sure that is the proper name written up here for seller. For the broker, remember, the listing agreements, contracts are always between the client and the brokerage. So that will say Hearthstone Realty, LLC. You are acting as the agent, as the designated agent for the brokerage to work with the client, so the broker will always be Hearthstone Realty. It's not even Evan Kaufman's name as the broker, it's Hearthstone Realty, LLC. Now looking at the property, we have the property address, the city, the county, the state, and the zip code. And then below that is the legal description. This is where we're finding all this information to get it right. We're going to go back to that main page, and we're going to click on Relist, where we see all the property information. And we have another training on this so that you can figure out how to gather tax information. But Relist is a wonderful resource where we can find out the naming and information on property. You can search by address over here on the left or by owner name. Or you can go to this cool map and zoom in on places and click on it. For example, I'll take Lincoln Park here in Newton. It's just a park. It's owned by the city of Newton. There's the tax ID. And you can click on it, and when going in, you see all this good information, including the tax data. But what you're going to want is this legal description right here. That's what you can copy, paste, and put in here for legal description. You can also, if you want to say legal description, then also say parcel ID and copy the parcel ID as well. But that gets you an accurate location for the property. Personal property, this is where if there's any personal property along with the deal, you want to type that in there. Oftentimes there's not, so you'll usually put NA unless there's something odd unique that the seller wants to leave with the property. Now, in terms of the agreement, this is where you put the date and date and the end date. For a commercial listing agreement, you generally want that no shorter than 6 months, and it's more ideal to get up closer to a year to list a property, because commercial properties often take longer than working residential sales to move, just because they're bigger transactions, there's fewer buyers for it, and the commercial market can sometimes dry up quicker than the residential market that's generally always moving. So you want to take that listing agreement for ideally 6 to 12 months, and this is where you would put that time frame in. Next line here, and we're going to be going through all this, all the highlighted areas, so you know what to fill in. That's what we're going to focus on. This is where we put the price. So you're listing it for $500,000, put $500,000. You're listing it for $2 million, we put $2 million in there. Down below here is following terms agreeable to the seller. This is where I'll put something like commercial loan, seller financing, different items on how they're willing to sell the property. If you're not sure or they're open to kind of anything for that sales price, you just put NA. But if you want to make sure they're aware, hey, are you okay with doing seller financing or not? If they are, then you might want to put in here seller financing. Because what this means is, hey, if I bring you an offer for $2 million that you wanted to sell the place for, and it is with a commercial loan, then all right, you have the chance to be compensated. If they tell you, no, I just don't want to sell it, you're like, but hey, it's for $2 million. But they're like, I don't like it because it's seller financing and I didn't want to do that. Well, then you're not getting paid. But if you had seller financing in here to cover you, you have an argument to still say, look, I brought you the offer you wanted. I spent the time and effort. I would like to be compensated for that, even though now you're trying to back away from the deal. So it's helped to cover you, and it just makes things more clear with the seller. So that is where I personally would put something like, if they're willing to do seller financing, to put that in here. Most of them all are okay with a property that comes with a loan, so you'd put commercial loan in here, or if, of course, cash, like, hey, we're willing to take a cash offer. Those are the three major ones: commercial loan, cash, or seller financing. Combination of them all is okay as well. So you can clear that in there, or if you're just, again, not sure, you just put NA for it, but just know that that doesn't necessarily protect you as much for your compensation, which is the next section. So seller agrees to pay broker compensation of, you can put in a dollar amount or flat fee plus a percentage. Now, if you're going to do percentage only, that's typically what we'll often see. You would just put in the percentage and put $0 on here. And a typical listing agreement for a commercial is going to be anywhere from 5 to 7%, depending on the complexities and what you have to deal with on the property. Make sure you just remember that while they're larger dollar amounts sometimes, they can be harder to move. Sometimes they just might not sell. So you got to take that into consideration. Next piece down here is a protection period. So we already talked about this front page. Hey, what we're selling, how long we get to list and sell it for, how much we're going to sell it for, how much myself as the agent and brokerage are getting paid. And then we have what's called a protection period. And this is what helps cover you so that if you list the property on, say, January 1st and it expires December 31st of that year, and you went over that year, you talked with 100 different people about the property, you handed out your prospectus forms on it that we recommend and show you how to build, and you're calling a lot of folks and following up, doing showings, etc. And then all of a sudden someone reaches out on January 1st of the following year and says, hey, I want to buy it. And they go talk to the seller directly. This protection period is what covers you to still be compensated. And that's what lines 2 and 3 talk about. So the key, it's an important line. And you notice if it's blank, they say they put 90 if left blank. Again, we never want to leave anything blank, so you'd even just put 90 if you're just going to go with kind of the standard. And I would say 90 is a minimum of what you want there. And ideally, if you could get it to be closer to 120 or 180, that's even better. But we've had deals before where you list the property and you get it going, and then all of a sudden, commercial deals, again, sometimes take longer. The buyer, you might have told them about it the year earlier, but they didn't have the money or weren't ready to buy. They call you back up a year later, or they call the seller up directly, or whoever, the new listing agent, if they went with a new listing agent, and call them and say, hey, I want to buy that, and you find that out, you have the right to still get paid because you brought that lead into the deal. So you want to have something in there to help cover you. And we explain that to sellers. Hey, the protection period is simply this. If our listing expires, sometimes it takes buyers a while to want to buy a commercial property. So if I told them about the property, let's say in November, and our listing expired in December, but they come around in January or February and want to work a deal and you're okay with it, this just says, hey, we recognize that Sally or Evan, let's say it was me having the listing, Evan brought the buyer in this case, he still gets compensated. Now, the key is this number 1 is you're gonna use to really protect you, and that's no later than blank calendar days, 10 if left blank. I'd put in there either 10 or up to 30. You're gonna send the seller a list of different clients who have come and seen the property, and that's what's gonna help protect you to use the protection period. So that's why it's important on commercial deals to track every person that has asked you about the property or you have talked to about the property. So if you've printed off a lot of prospectuses and went to a bunch of, say, bankers and insurance guys and other buyers and clients, you want to make sure you just have that list of all those folks you talked to and mark down their date that you did and then give that to the seller. Because in that way, if they come back around and buy the property after your listing's expired and it's within that protection period, the seller's going to know too, okay, hey, Johnny came to buy this because Evan was listing the property and got it in their hands. Okay, I still got to compensate them. So it's an important clause to pay attention to. Next is our marketing fee. This is unique to the commercial contract. If you decide to select it, you can actually have the seller pay you a non-refundable marketing fee in a certain amount. Again, it takes longer to sometimes move commercial properties, and sometimes they don't move at all. And when I say move, of course, it means sell. So if you want to cover some of your risk for that and make sure that the seller essentially is being very serious about the deal, you can add some dollar amount. Now, if I'm taking a listing, I'm going to pay attention to the pricing and their expectations. And if I'm pretty confident that the property we're going to be able to get it moved and sold, then I might put $0 on this and say, hey, I'm going to put my expense into this and my time, but I'm trusting that you're very motivated to do this. But if I know the price and everything is fitting right, that's usually easier for the seller to digest and make sense to them. But if you're not certain, because again, commercial deals oftentimes aren't necessarily they have to sell. It's not like they're being foreclosed on or having to move jobs somewhere. Sometimes it is, but it's more rare. They're often just wanting to sell and would like to move to a new opportunity. So you need to protect your time and effort too, and sometimes that's where putting a dollar amount in can help do that. So if you see it being a larger marketed property that you know you're going to spend maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 on marketing, that's doing advertisements in the paper, business journal, making a video for it, pushing it out, etc., then maybe you want to ask for some of that as a non-refundable marketing fee. And if you do that, then that's something that you're saying, hey, we want to make sure that we get paid this up front, and you're explaining that to sellers like they have down here, for example, in the sections. We're just going to read these ones out because it does make a difference for marketing fee. At closing, broker shall provide an itemized list of actual costs incurred to advertise. In the event that the amount the marketing fee paid by seller to buyer upon execution does not exceed the actual cost, then the broker shall refund the excess amount of marketing fee to the seller at closing. The key here is you can't accept a fee prior to an actual sale and commission. You can't act like this is going to be a commission dollar amount. So you need to keep good receipts if you're going to mark this marketing fee. So if you spent $3,000, you better have at least $3,000, or if you put $3,000 in here, you better at least have $3,000 of invoices to show that it went towards this cost. For example, if you took an ad out in the paper, you have the ad for that paper. In the event that the amount of the actual cost incurred by broker, blah, 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 to exceed the agreement, seller shall pay the additional amount of funds required to offset broker's actual cost to advertise, market, and the sale for the closing. So this is the reverse. If it happens to be a little bit higher, you can actually ask them for more. Your choice on ultimately if you want to do that, but the contract's written to protect you for that. Now, in the event of a sale property does not close due to a default of the buyer or seller under terms and conditions of the sale between the party, seller agrees that any additional funds required to offset broker's actual costs to advertise shall be paid by the seller to the broker as if the sale of the property had closed. So this is saying, hey, if the property closes, then or it doesn't close, then and you spent more than this, you can still go for that money. And one thing you can always work with the seller as well is that you can reduce this marketing fee from commissions as well, or from the sale fee that you're charging up above. The key of this paragraph, though, or this section, is you're saying, hey, we're going to be compensated for the marketing piece separate from the commission as a whole. But it makes sure that, again, it's helping limit your risk when listing commercial property. You got to decide if you want to use this or not. I would suggest it depends on your feeling of how motivated the seller is, how much you believe the price is reasonable to sell, and then gauging just the relationship with the seller on trusting if you bring them a deal, they're going to close or not. That's our marketing fee. You have the option of using it if you would so like. Broker obligation to seller, section 8 here. This is stating of what you're going to do for the seller. It's an important one to read all through. We're going to talk again on the main sections that have options for you to change. So C is presenting in a timely manner all offers to and from the seller. Broker shall present all offers to the seller when such offers received prior to the closing of the sale, unless the seller agrees to one of the following provisions. Now, personally, I will typically not mark these because if I get any other offers prior to our closing, I'm going to disclose that to the seller. And a lot of sellers want to know that. Explaining these two options here, which are essentially, hey, broker's not obligated to continue to market the property or bring the seller offers, can be a little bit harder to tell a seller. But if you decided, hey, I want to make sure that if I bring you an offer that we're not muddying the current deal we're working on, I would like you to select this one or this one, it's perfectly fine. You can choose to do so, and that'll also limit your requirements to continue to market property once you're under contract. Personally, though, I want to make sure that if we can get a backup deal, we at least have a backup deal lined up in case the current deal falls through, so I'll typically not mark either of these. But it is your option, if you so choose, that you want to make sure the seller knows that you're not obligated to bring them any offers, meaning that this also even means that if someone sent you an offer after you're under contract, you don't even have to bring it to them. Then you can do so because you're afraid maybe that's going to somehow muddy up the current deals you have and could jeopardize some reason their deal in their best interest. I just generally see leaving them blank for my work because I want to make sure we have backups and, of course, disclosing to them because I'm their agent to make sure they're aware. So reading through the rest of them is just the basics of making sure you know what you have to do for them and that they know expectation-wise. And a lot of it's the standard agent representation of a seller. Seller's obligation to the broker. This is what you want to make sure you go over with them to essentially say, hey, you guys are going to allow me to make sure we can list and sell the property, and you're going to give me honest information. I can't work off of false information, so when I ask for things such as property disclosure items, you're going to work and give those to me. Next section, seller authorization to broker. This is what makes it so that you can really get this property sold through helping use other agents. So I recommend you'd work to have all of these marked as yes, and I would explain to sellers, this is how we make sure that we have the ability to promote our listing to the broadest number of people possible. And that's by us offering cooperation, meaning that yes, we're okay taking an offer from another buyer's agent. We're okay with taking that. And then on top of it, we're okay with paying that buyer's agent if they come. Now, if you want to try to keep the whole commission and tell the buyers that they got to have their client pay for their own agent, which sometimes happens in the commercial, you can say no. You can say, yes, we're going to co-op, but no, we don't want to offer them compensation. And then you want to make sure that the buyers know that if the buyer's agent brings it, hey, man, you have to get compensated by your own buyers. I've seen that done before. But still, even in commercial, it's typical to offer cooperation and compensation. I would recommend to still do some kind of compensation. You get to set that number how you want, but that compensation to a buyer's agent, because you want to make sure you just get the property sold. So typically we would say yes on all of these, unless you want to prevent for some reason a buyer's agent from getting paid. Same with so that's buyer's agent. Designated agent means it's going to allow, again, remember the contract, the listing agreement is between the client and the brokerage. This allows you as the agent who's designated to work for them to get paid. So you want to definitely make sure those are marked. Same with sub-agents. Because if you had someone working under you as a designated agent, you want to make sure they can get paid. But then transaction brokerage as well, which we're going to talk about next, because this is making sure that if you happen to bring a buyer that you're already representing, that you have an agreement with, then you can get paid in that scenario as well. Next part is number 11, inclusion of the property on the MLS. If you're going to put it on the actual MLS, you mark broker shall submit it. But if you're not, and sometimes commercial listings, folks don't necessarily want it on the MLS because they don't want everybody to see it on Realtor.com, Zillow, and the regular MLS search, you'd mark shall not. But this doesn't necessarily limit you, though, from marketing on LoopNet or other sources, which I would recommend then putting on as a separate addendum. If you're not going to mark shall submit it on the MLS, then you put shall not, but then have a separate addendum, listing agent intends on listing on LoopNet, all the different sites that you have, LoopNet, Crexy, etc., KS Commercial, RE, all those spots. And so this allows you to do so and then saying, okay, we agree to do it. Now, seller's obligation to disclose adverse material facts regarding the property. This is one that personally, as an agent, when I list a property, I want to make sure that they do give us a commercial property disclosure. Because the next one here is upon signing this agreement, seller shall or shall not complete a disclosure to be provided to folks. I personally like to make sure we get that because it covers us as the agent and the sellers as well. So as I recommend to them, if you put it on the sheet and the buyer bought the property and they try to come back for you later for it, you know that you at least disclosed it. If they didn't, it just gets a little bit muddier. So this is really making sure the sellers know that, hey, we're going to give you honest information. We're going to fill out a disclosure on the property. And that's one of the other forms that's in the MLS. Scrolling on down, broker recommends seller to seek legal professional advice. This is just reminding them that, hey, we're not attorneys and that here, even though we have this listing agreement, we recommend that you get outside legal advice if you so choose. Liabilities for inspection. This is making sure that they know that they need to allow us to do such inspections, but also to hold us harmless for any liabilities on inspections. So say the buyer gets in there and tears something up, we want to make sure we're held harmless for making sure the inspection occurred. Brokerage relationship disclosure, this is an important one where we have some check boxes. Seller consents or does not consent to transaction brokerage. We want to make sure that ideally, yes, they're okay with transaction brokerage status, and this is usually where we'll explain what that means. And I would say along the lines of transaction brokerage means that if I happen to bring the buyer to your listing agreement and I'm representing them, this means that you're going to be okay that I work with both sides And being a transaction broker, we have the outlines of what that means on the transaction broker addendum that we would sign separately. But in general, it means that if I know their highest price they're willing to go, I'm not going to disclose that to you. But at the same time, I'm not disclosing to them the personal information you have. I'm just helping make sure the deal is facilitated and worked. The pros are I'm on both sides, so I can help try to make sure that the deal gets facilitated really quickly and can make sure communication moves smoothly. Are you okay with that? Great. Consents. And also to say, hey, in commercial deals, this can happen relatively often. It can happen, anywhere from, I know some commercial agents, that's almost all they do. So you want to make sure that they're aware of what it is. And if they go, well, I don't want to do that, well, then you'd say does not consent. And you got to know if you're okay taking that. Second part is here in saying consents to a designated agent relationship. Now, this is where if you're not the broker, you need to mark yes to this because you are the designated agent. So let's say we said that the seller consents to designated agent and the broker's authorized representative hereby designates blank, which would be your name as a listing agent here, to act as a designated agent on the seller's behalf. So it means that we would ultimately put in our real estate agent's name who's taking the listing right here and that they're okay with it. Next part here is consents to that designated agent if they can become a transaction broker on a deal, and you want to put consent yes to that, especially if you have consents yes up here to transaction brokerage. And the key there is that they also are aware that the broker is operating as the transaction broker, the agent themselves is the designated authorized seller's agent. So that's our important piece here, where generally we want to see it as consents, and the name of the agent right there. All right, seller knowledge of potential broker act as transaction broker. This is where it's saying, hey, we're giving you essentially a warning, I guess I should say, that there's a possibility we could operate as a transaction broker. And when you give them the Brita, the explanation of how brokerages work, it has on there a good explanation for transaction broker. Remember to always hand them that. They don't need to necessarily sign it, but always have that in your initial documents to a seller, to a listing even as well. So seller's acknowledgement of possible designated agent relationships. This just breaks out all the different ways that we can ultimately represent them. Title evidence. This is where you can have the opportunity to put in here that, hey, seller authorized us to pre-order title evidence. I'd recommend doing this so that everything's prepared and that there's no snags that come up. For example, especially in commercial deals, sometimes there's been sales that have happened and maybe a signature got missed and you want title already pre-do that. So this is where you would put the name of the title insurance company, and then you would put the name of the property that the property is owned by right here. And then this would give you the opportunity of when they sign the listing agreement, you can go right to the title company and say, hey, Sally or Harry, we've got this new listing. Can you please prep the title work? And then when you get an offer, you can let the buyers know, hey, title work has already been reviewed and it's cleared, or they're working through this and here's the location that we can do it. Sometimes it helps. It's a good selling point when listing a property. Also helps us make sure the seller is serious to get this thing sold. And generally, title companies don't charge anything for that. They're happy to do it because they know there's a good chance they can get the work afterwards. Next lines here are just general contract line items, talking about if there's attorney's fees, making sure they know that electronic signatures are valid, etc. All those items. If you have any questions, ask me, but it's the general legal boilerplates that they have. Now, last part here is special conditions and provisions. This is where if you have any catch-all, you're going to put it in here. This could be, along those lines of if there's some special kind of pay that you're going to have, if there's some random clause that they have, like, hey, I've told my friend Rick about this property, and if he decides to buy it, I don't want to do anything in here. So you can put, if Rick so-and-so, their exact name, decides to purchase, this agreement's invalid. I would recommend, though, as a listing agent, to tell a seller if they ever give you that, which I've gotten multiple times on commercial deals, to tell them, hey, that's wonderful. I want to make sure that's something I cannot work with. So I want you to please reach back out to Rick. Make sure they're okay or not okay with buying this property, and then let's move forward with this. I'm perfectly fine with you taking the time to do that. How about we give you a couple days, or how about I even call Rick myself and I'll let him know, and let's just clear that up so we can have this as clear. Because here's the last thing I want is that Rick says he doesn't want to buy it, but the moment they see that it's listed and that there's interest, and all of a sudden they go, oh, maybe I do want that. If they come back around and offer to buy in the next month or two, I would argue that that's because of my marketing, my push, my enticing them to go, man, this is actually maybe more valuable than I thought. and I want to make sure I'm compensated on that. But to make sure that, since you've talked with them already about it, let's clear it up with them right now. Are you okay with doing that? You can call them now. You want to take a few days after you sign this? I'm happy to put in here, Rick can buy it if it's within the next 7 business days, but term that down. So point being, recommendation, if you're going to have something like that, like there's some caveat to selling, try to clear that up before the listing starts or put a determined deadline on it. So that's where you put random things like that within the contract. Last part on here is just where you have everyone sign off on everything. You're going to put the broker, the broker, Hearthstone Realty. Then this is where you have the affiliated license or representative. This is where you'd have your name as the agent taking the listing. And then you put our address in there, the 2400 North Woodlawn, Suite 100, address city, the telephone number as well for us. And then the seller, you're going to get all their information and put it in here as well. And that, in a nutshell, is the listing agreement. Trying to figure out how to zoom out for us. You can just see what that looks like. There's all the pages for it. Pretty simple, pretty clean. You want to now take this, and I would recommend going through it and acting as though you're talking to a seller about it, and eventually we'll have a posting as well on that. So wish you the best. Hope this was good training for it. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.